What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a new video series that I'm doing here on this channel called Robbery or Not. And as the name might suggest, I'm going to go through several robberies or contentious decisions throughout the UFC that have had people up in arms throughout the years. And I'm going to be going a little deeper into them, analyzing them, giving my thoughts on them, and at the end I will conclude whether I do believe it was a robbery or not. But first, I do want to try to explain at the beginning of every episode what is a robbery, because we'll probably be using that term a lot throughout the series. A robbery, in my definition, is a fight where it was scored for fighter A, but according to most fans or media members or even the organization itself, shouldn't have been scored for fighter A and should have instead been scored for fighter B, thus robbing fighter B of the win. This can be due to poor scoring criteria, poor judging, or even corruption in some cases. More of a case in boxing, but it can happen in MMA or other sports as well. Keep in mind, a robbery is usually a close fight. There are some pretty terrible exceptions that we'll look at later on throughout the series, where certain robberies have been not close fights at all, but just in a general case, robberies are close fights. Also, just because you think fighter B should have won the fight doesn't necessarily make it a robbery. Some fights are just really close and honestly 50-50. Which we will also look at a couple fights of that case throughout the series. A robbery has to be blatant. It has to be obvious. Even if it is a close fight, it still has to be obvious that fighter A did not deserve the win and that it should have absolutely gone to fighter B, and it has to be a vast majority. So with that short definition section out of the way, we are going to get into our first fight of the series, which you may have seen is probably the classic example of title fight robberies, especially in recent UFC history. We are going to be looking at, yes, and you guessed by the title in the thumbnail, Dominick Reyes versus Jon Jones, the robbery that everyone talks about. Now, we'll just go over this briefly, how the judges scored the contest. As we all know, 48-47, 48-47, and 49-46, all in favor of Jon Jones. More specifically, the first judge scored it rounds 1 and 2 for Dominick Reyes and 3 through 5 for Jones. Judge 2 scored the contest 1 and 3 for Reyes, but 2, 4, and 5 for Jones. And the third judge scored it 1 for Reyes and 2 through 5 for Jones. So as you can see, the judges aren't really in agreement on a lot of the rounds. Probably the most reasonable scorecard, in my opinion, out of the bunch is the first judges, 1 and 2 for Reyes and 3 through 5 for Jones. That honestly isn't an atrocious scorecard, although I do disagree with it. 1 and 3 Reyes, 2, 4, and 5 for Jones is very odd, and we'll get to that in a second. And especially the 49-46 scorecard is also quite odd. Now, how did I score this fight? You know, I scored it like pretty much everyone else does. I scored it rounds 1 through 3 for Reyes and 4 and 5 for Jones. This isn't really an unpopular opinion. This isn't a wild thing, right? A lot of people think this. Most people think that Dominick Reyes won the first 3 rounds and Jones won the last 2 rounds, therefore winning Dominick the fight. And yes, like I said, I do stand on that opinion. But let's look a bit more into this and see what went on in this fight, my thoughts overall, and why it was close in the first place, because we do have to analyze why the fight was close and why the judges may have scored it for Jones. So my thoughts, I do want to initially analyze the scorecards for them a bit deeper and for themselves. 49-46 for Jon Jones is kind of ridiculous. At least they gave Dom the first round, I guess. Like I said, Dom, I think, pretty clearly won the first 3 rounds. At the very least, he won the first 2 rounds. I don't know how you give the second round to Jon Jones. Also, the second judge, the second 48-47 judge, scored the first round for Reyes, the third round for Reyes, but scored the second round for Jon Jones. And my thought is, how do you do that? How do you score the third round for Dominick Reyes, which was the closest round of the whole fight? That honestly is the swing round. That's where the first judge scored that third round for Jon Jones. And the third judge scored that third round for Jon Jones, obviously, right? Everyone was in agreement for rounds 4 and 5 for Jon Jones, and I am in the agreement too. Jones pretty clearly won the last 2 rounds, obviously. Dominic was a little tired out. Jones put on the pressure more in those rounds, and he engaged in the grappling more in those last 2 rounds. So yes, Jon Jones did win the last 2 rounds. But the third round is honestly the closest round of the whole fight, and I wouldn't be super upset if you said that Jon Jones won the third round, although I do disagree with it. But like I said, the first 2 rounds were pretty clear for Dominic Reyes if you watch the fight, and we'll get to that in a second. So how do you score the second round for Jon Jones, but the third round for Dominic Reyes? It just makes me wonder what was going through that judge's head in the fight. And to be clear, I agree with him scoring round 3 for Dominic Reyes. I'm not saying that it's atrocious to score round 3 for Dominic Reyes. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I scored 1 through 3 for Reyes and 4 and 5 for Jones. But round 3 was objectively a closer round than round 2. So how do you give... It just doesn't make sense to me. And I guess we'll get into the nuances of the fight. Dominic Reyes, why he won the first 3 rounds, he was outstriking Jon Jones in the first 3 rounds. You look at the numbers. Dominic Reyes outstruck Jon Jones in the first 3 rounds, and Jon Jones outstruck him in the last 2 rounds. On paper, it's pretty clear that Reyes got the better numbers, but numbers don't always tell everything, right? You can outstrike someone, but get outdone in the round still. So let's look at it. Dominic Reyes' boxing proved to be a bit too much for Jon Jones in the first 3 rounds. He was constantly tagging Jones, punishing him for walking him down against the fence, and he was the one staying the most active on his bike, peppering Jones with shots, catching him clean, whereas Jon Jones really couldn't catch him clean besides a couple of kicks. And he did drop Jones at one point. It was kind of a hit to the chest of an off-balance kick, but still, it was a more significant moment in the fight than Jon Jones did in any of the first 3 rounds. Dominic had the more significant moments, he was landing cleaner, and he was higher output. All of those in combination with each other can give you Dominic Reyes winning the first 3 rounds. And in the last 2 rounds, Dominic began to tire just a little bit, and Jones began to turn up the pressure, leading to Jon Jones outstriking Dominic Reyes by a slight margin and out-wrestling him just barely, though. Jones got a couple of takedowns, but Reyes was able to very quickly pop back up to his feet. But regardless, Jones still put on more pressure in the 4th and the 5th, and Reyes gave a bit less answer and less output in the 4th and the 5th, thus justifying Jones's pressure and pace and outstriking numbers of him, and leading to Jones winning the 4th and the 5th. Now, Jon Jones did also try to put pressure on Reyes in the first 3 rounds. He arguably was doing better in the ring generalship department. Yes, Reyes' back was against the fence for a lot of the first 3 rounds. For most of the first 3 rounds, much more than Jon was. But that doesn't mean much when Reyes is outstriking, outlanding, and hitting Jones cleaner than Jones is hitting him. But in the last 2 rounds, Jones was putting on more pressure than he was in the first 3, most likely given that Dominic was starting to tire just a little bit. He wasn't completely gassed, but he was starting to tire just a little bit, and his output was getting a lot less, and he was getting just a little bit slower, allowing Jones to put on the pressure that he needed and the pace that he needed to cut off Reyes and win those last 2 rounds. So if you want to say that Jones wins because he was the one pressuring, he was the one walking Reyes down, well, that doesn't tell the whole story. And the 4th and the 5th, just like I said, I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but I have to touch on my bases. Jones was pressuring him, not only that he was outstriking him, and Reyes was throwing less and landing less than Jon Jones was. Whereas the first 3 rounds, yes, Jones was walking him down. Jones was keeping him against the fence for the most part, and Jones was holding the space of the octagon, whereas Reyes kept having to circle the fence, kept having to move, stay on his bike. That's probably why he tired out just a little bit. He was really trying hard in that fight. But in the first 3 rounds, like I said so many times, maybe I should just stop repeating myself, but I'll say it one final time. Reyes not only was throwing and landing more strikes, he was landing much cleaner on Jon Jones more times than Jon Jones was landing on him. Given that, it's pretty clear that Reyes wins the first 3 rounds. Now, like I said, round 3 is pretty close. Jones started to come back a little bit and land some of his own, and the striking numbers were closer in the third than they were in the first and the second. But my point still stands. Reyes outlanded him, Reyes landed cleaner in him than he did, and Jones threw a takedown attempt, I believe, and Reyes shucked it off pretty cleanly. Jones was not able to make his pressure work, he was not able to make his pressure count, and Reyes was still outdoing him. It was a competitive fight, don't get me wrong. I do believe that it is pretty dang clear that 1 through 3 is Reyes and 4 and 5 is Jones. I believe that is very clear. However, it was a close and competitive fight due to Jones's pressure and ring generalship and his takeover in the 4th and the 5th, plus that close 3rd round. 1 and 2 were very clear for Reyes, 4 and 5 were very clear for Jones, and I do believe round 3 was clear for Reyes, but it was much more competitive than the first 2. So given that, I guess I get where the judges were looking from, but I can only get the first judge. I can only understand and give the first judge grace, who scored it 1 and 2 for Reyes and 3 through 5 for Jones. I can give that judge grace. But the other 2, I think, are on a completely different planet. The 3rd judge is the one who scored it 49-46, and like I said, 4 rounds for Jones is kind of insane, right? How do you score round 2 for Jones? It was pretty dang similar to the first round. I don't know what you saw that was different than the first round. It was pretty much all the same. Jones was keeping the ring generalship. He was walking him down, doing this whole thing, trying to land kicks on him and some jabs. But Reyes, every time Jones would enter the pocket, Reyes would just crack him over and over again. And he was outstriking him at range. It was not much different than the first round. How do you score the second for Jones? It just does not make sense to me. And the second judge arguably is on more crack than the 49-46 judge, and that's saying a lot. Like, he scored 2 rounds for Reyes, I understand, but like I said before, the 3rd round was the closest of the whole fight. So how do you say, yes, I do believe Reyes won the 3rd round? No, but Jones won the 2nd round. That doesn't make any sense to me. So in this instance of the fight, I do believe this is a factor and a result of poor judging criteria. The judges not really knowing what they're looking at, especially the last 2 judges. They both scored the 2nd round for Jones. And the second judge scored the 2nd round for Jones, but the 3rd round for Reyes. So I don't believe these judges know what they're looking at. The first judge can probably be let off the hook for scoring the 3rd round for Reyes, but these last 2 judges, like I just said so many times before, I don't think they know how to score the fights properly, and I think they were just putting scores down on their cards, just kind of guessing. It's like, I think Jones won that round. I think Reyes probably got that round, I guess. I mean, Jones probably got that one too. You know, why not? And maybe there was a bit of corruption from the company wanting to make sure that Jones could edge out the numbers as much as they could. They wanted to keep their GOAT of the sport as the GOAT of the sport. They wanted to keep him on top and not let this, quote, nobody, Dominic Reyes, beat him. Because let's be honest, Dominic Reyes coming up didn't exactly beat the most stellar of competition when coming up to Jon Jones. But then again, who else was there for Jon Jones to fight in the light heavyweight division? Jan Blachowicz was on the come up, but he didn't get there just yet. It was Reyes' turn first, then it would have been Blachowicz's turn if Jones stayed in the light heavyweight division. And Reyes' best win was Volkan Ozdemir, and I know that he beat Chris Weidman, but let's just be real, his best win was Volkan Ozdemir at the time, right? So coming into this fight, it was like, are we really gonna entertain the possibility that this nobody, Dominic Reyes, would somehow beat the GOAT of the sport on that night. And I don't think that they were probably willing to accept that. And so maybe there was a bit of bias from the company to the judges on this night, but I'm not sure. I'll have to look more into that one. So to conclude it all, do I think this close fight was a robbery? I do believe so. And I do believe so given the fact that I do believe the first 3 rounds were clear for Dominic Reyes. And I know I did say the third round was close, and I could understand giving it to Jon Jones, but I do still believe the pieces are there for Dominic Reyes to win that round. They were similar to the first 2 rounds, and that yes, Jones was walking him down, doing his Jones thing, walking him down, hand extension, doing the whole thing, kicking him, making sure he's backed up against the fence. Jon Jones's pressure is very good, but Dominic Reyes did not crack under the pressure of Jon Jones. Every time Jones tried to enter the pocket, boom, he would get hit with clean, precise shots from Reyes. And Reyes had decent head movement to counter and stay off the center and not allow Jones to land his straight shots or his elbows coming in or let him get a hold of him in the clinch. Reyes was also doing a very good job at staying on his bike, not letting Jones grab him and start throwing knees and elbows in the clinch and allowing him to get takedowns early. Because that's really where Jon Jones thrives, is once he enters that pocket and he's able to land those elbows and he's able to land those knees in the clinch. Jon Jones is very dangerous and very creative in the clinch, and Reyes was doing a very good job at not allowing Jones to do that. And like I said before, in the third round, Reyes was still doing that thing. Jones was able to put a bit more pressure on and shoot a takedown attempt and landed just a bit more strikes than he did in the previous rounds, making the third round closer, but Reyes still was the one doing the better job in the third round. He was the one outstriking Jon Jones by a slight margin in the third round. He was the one landing cleaner and more significant shots than Jon Jones in the third round. And not only that, he stuffed Jones's takedown attempt. Yeah, if you want to say that, oh, maybe Jones initiated the grappling, that was the equalizer, bro. He did nothing with that. He shot a takedown, couldn't get it, and the fight resumed as it normally would. That is null and void. And finally, given the judges' scorecards that we just discussed, I do believe it was a robbery, and I do believe the scoring criteria was wrong. And so with that to conclude, I have the first video in my series done, and I have definitively looked into and picked apart the fight of Dominic Reyes versus Jon Jones. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you would like to see more videos like this on the channel, consider liking, subscribing. I have a big backlog of robberies that I am constantly watching. I'll rewatch fights. I'll look more and more into it, and I'll just give you my thoughts on the matter. And I'll keep pumping more videos out on this. Honestly, regardless if you like them or not, I'm just going to keep pumping out videos. So stay tuned for all that. And thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.